Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be looking at a massive, really foundational, structural shift in how we live today, one that has totally altered the family unit all across the globe. We're going to explore exactly how society is actively rethinking human connection and how some incredibly innovative communities are working to rebuild it from the ground up.
So think about this for a second. Why are our oldest and youngest generations experiencing the exact same modern crisis? It's a pretty striking paradox, right? We have two totally different demographics at completely opposite ends of the human experience, and yet they are currently bound together by a surprisingly similar challenge in our modern world.
Okay, let's dive right into the foundational text we are decoding today. It basically serves as our blueprint, breaking down exactly how our social structures have fractured over time, and the very intentional ways we're trying to piece them back together.
Here is our roadmap for today's journey. First, the extended family era. Second, social shifts and rising loneliness. Third, a surprising shared epidemic. And finally, bridging the age gap.
Section 1. The Extended Family Era, How We Used to Live. To really understand the crisis we're in now, we have to rewind a bit to a time when multi-generational living under one roof was just the norm. It was how things worked. Children had ready-made carers available, which were usually their grandparents, and in turn, those oldest members of the family would also be looked after as they aged. Built-in childcare perfectly met built-in elder care. It allowed working generations to rely on this highly mutually beneficial daily ecosystem where the elders remained deeply valued, integrated members of the household.
Section 2. Social shifts and rising loneliness, the catalyst for change.
We didn't just wake up one morning and randomly decide to stop living together. Fundamental structural elements shifted underneath us. First off, life expectancy has risen dramatically over the last 50 years, which is great, but concurrently it's become incredibly common for family members to move away for work. The direct result of this globalized, highly mobile society is that children simply have way less physical contact with their grandparents. That daily support network that used to completely define the family unit has basically been severed.
And the fallout from this societal shift has been, well, severe. According to a survey commissioned by the UK government, almost 3/4 of older people who have chosen to live alone frequently feel lonely. 3/4. That is a staggering and frankly heartbreaking statistic. We've gained all these incredible decades of life expectancy, but for so many, those extra years are being spent in deep isolation, simply because that built-in family community is no longer just down the hall.
Section 3. A surprising shared epidemic, beyond the elderly.
But here is where it gets really unexpected. This structural shift didn't just leave our seniors behind. Teenagers and young people now report the second highest feelings of isolation. This is the shared epidemic that really bridges the empathy gap. The two generations that historically spent the absolute most time together, grandparents and grandchildren, are now the two loneliest demographics in our entire society. They're both suffering from the exact same deficit of connection.
Section 4. Bridging the age gap, the modern village cure.
The good news is, communities around the world are actively engineering some brilliant solutions to bring the old and the young back together. For example, in Seattle, the Providence Mount St. Vincent Care Home took a very direct approach. They incorporated a kindergarten right into their facility. It's literal physical integration under one roof. Now, contrast that with Singapore, where they're developing entire housing schemes that create supportive, intergenerational networks right within the same neighborhood. Two totally different approaches, but both are actively solving this dual demographic crisis.
If you're looking for real-world proof of how these blended models actually play out, the Seattle project was captured brilliantly in a documentary called The Growing Season. It just beautifully demonstrates that when you put these two isolated groups together, they completely revitalize each other. It proves that this modern village cure really works in action.
And this isn't just happening in individual buildings. It's happening on a massive macroeconomic scale. Get this, the government of Singapore is investing $2 billion to improve the overall experience of aging. They aren't just crossing their fingers and hoping people organically connect. They are actively funding urban planning and housing schemes to purposefully bring generations back together into supportive networks. They recognize that solving a structural loneliness problem requires some serious structural investment.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. How could these intentional intergenerational solutions apply to your own community? We've seen how historical family structures dissolved, leaving our oldest and youngest incredibly isolated.
But we've also seen how places like Seattle and Singapore are actively and successfully rebuilding the modern village. So as you go about your week, I want you to look at your own neighborhood, your own town, and ask yourself how we might intentionally bridge the age gap right where you live. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep actively seeking out those vital connections.